Who wants a Georgia State Panthers job? It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, special guest on today's show, Ben Moore from GSU Panther Talk and 24/7 Sports. We go over the coaching search for Georgia State, now entering its sixth day. So tomorrow will make a week since Shawn Elliott has decided to, or it'll be a week for the coaching search, since I think it was like last Thursday that he announced that he was going to South Carolina. We do a little bit of background first with Ben, the state of Georgia State football, the G5 finances, because apparently as a tight end coach, well, you'll find out how much Shawn Elliott is making as the tight end coach. The GSU Candidates, who wants the gig, and apparently plenty do. And we can't let Ben go without talking to him about the legendary Lefty Driesell, who passed away this past weekend. Let's get to it. He is the publisher of GSU Panthers Talk. He is on 24/7 Sports. He is Ben Moore on Locked On Sunbelt. Dave Schultz back with another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. They did a switcheroo on me. I thought I was getting Brady Weiler from GSU Panther Talk. I'm getting the publisher. So apparently we've moved up in the world. We get Ben Moore from 24/7 Sports. Ben, thanks for hopping on. So, slow news week last week on with Georgia State. Before we get into the coaching whole rigmarole, which we are now on actually day 6 of the coaching search, give us a state, and pun completely intended, of Georgia State football, because they were off to this great start last year, 6-1, had a huge, game-saving interception in the end zone against the Cajuns, and then they didn't win another ball game until the bowl game, which I thought was still really impressive. They played really well out there, going three quarters away across the country. So we'll just ignore for right now that they are searching for a head coach, okay? And they need a quarterback. So what was the state of Georgia State football? Because, the East and the Sun Belt still has divisions, is really hard. App State, JMU, Marshall, and Coastal, right? Those teams have been up there, and once in a while, Georgia Southern decides to play good football. And ODU was surprising this year. What is the state of Georgia State football?
Yeah, I think that's you nailed it. Coming off of 22, where you had 8 losses, right? 4-8, just an absolute disaster of a season. But if you kind of zoom in even a little further, 6 of the 8 losses in 2022, the Panthers had a lead in the second half, including games against South Carolina on the road in week 1, including week 2 against North Carolina at home. The Panthers were up 28-21 late in the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter against Drake May, who most assume is going to be a top 5 pick here this April. Moving forward to 2023, expectations were really high. You had a ton of the roster back, including Darren Granger, offensive line, defensive line. Even though some guys and key guys were taken from the portal, Shawn Elliott went shopping. He went to the portal for the first time in his career, going and getting 15, 16 guys who were going to play. As you mentioned, sprint out to the 6-1 start. One of the transfers that I mentioned, Tyji Leach and Gavin Pringle, both impact guys in Cajun land down there. And then the schedule got ridiculously harder. Let's be candid here.
All right. Fair enough.
I mean, that's where it kind of starts and ends. I mean, you're not playing Charlotte, you're not playing Connecticut. You're now playing App State, who Georgia State never beats. James Madison, who rocked a lot of people's world. Right. Yeah, and then you honestly had just an absolute embarrassment of a first half on national TV against Georgia Southern, and Georgia Southern was ready for that game. Georgia State wasn't. The game was basically over at halftime, short of the statistical analysis. But, all the credit in the world to Shawn Elliott and his staff, because they took the month of December, could have pouted because Let's see, they lost Marcus Carroll to Missouri in December. They lost their right tackle, Montavious Cunningham, to Virginia Tech. They lost their left tackle as he prepared for the draft. John Trey Hunter, who their starting linebacker, he did the same and says, "Nope, I'm not going out to Boise to go play against Utah State. I'm going to prepare." And that was a right decision for him if you look back and see what he's done so far in the Senior Bowl and got an invite to the Combine. But then they go out there and just absolutely thump Utah State and Blake Anderson. And, it set the program up for some momentum, kind of going in and really brought a lot of guys back, had reached into the portal again, grabbing some guys that were Power 5 guys from the metro Atlanta area and from Georgia as a whole, who played some at their respective schools, like Martrez Thrower at Kentucky or Joshua Black at Louisville, Zach Gibson at Georgia Tech, guys that were from Georgia to come home and play their final few years here. And even after losing Marcus Carroll, reaching out to Clemson and going to get Dom Thomas, going to get Coastal C.J. Beasley, guy that has been productive in the Sun Belt. So they had reloaded in a major way, and they were looking to kind of attack this 2024 schedule pretty hard. And then the news comes last Thursday. It hit my phone about 5:45 in the morning.
Oh, goodness.
There basically was a text message saying that, the third day of practice was going to be canceled and that there was going to be a team meeting at 8:30. And I was going, all right, well, that's kind of interesting. So what happened? What's going on? Maybe
all right.
Shawn kind of
this would
a
be
tone.
my first thought that something health-wise happened to one of the players. That would have been 100%. My first thought.
100%.
Okay.
So, something happened. Something was going on. Something needed to be paused. Something. I mean, if this was 3.5 years ago, we would have said, okay. It was fascinating to me to kind of see what happened next. So, Coach Elliott, Charlie Cobb, they addressed the team from what I understand, let them know basically Shawn was leaving, and then Shawn was gone. And obviously the news hit nationally. He was the, fourth or fifth sitting coach in this offseason cycle to leave his post to go to another job. And, even in the Sun Belt, Kane Womack goes and takes the job at Alabama to be in D.C. The Buffalo head coach resigns to take a position. Jeff Hafley up at Boston College leaves to take an NFL coordinator job. Then you have Chip Kelly, who drops down and takes the OC job at Ohio State. But this one, I will say, even more had extenuating circumstances simply because Shawn's family was still remaining in Columbia, and that was very public. That was not a secret. They came over for games, and he would spend as much time as he could over there. And even this past year, the Columbia newspapers had reported that he basically hadn't missed one of his son's Friday night football games as a first-year player for the varsity program there in AC Flora. So that was kind of wide open for me and opened my eyes. I mean, he very openly skipped a open practice for the fans and students that they had set up in August to go see his son play a varsity football game. And I arrived about an hour and a half before that practice and looked around and was like, I don't see Shawn Elliott here at all. Like, where is he? And sent a couple text messages.
He's tough to miss. He's tough to miss.
Max is playing. Yeah. Max is gone. So it's very interesting to see, kind of how this has progressed and built. But this wasn't a shock. I've said that multiple times to people. This was not a surprise for folks close to the program. This was a possibility, and he was only going back to Columbia. Now, he even said in the press release, hey, look, he understands that this was a family decision and a personal decision, and most likely hurts him professionally, right? You take multiple steps back, he probably is not going to be a head coach again.
All right, let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll talk to Ben more about the finances and the challenges that G5 schools like Georgia State are facing. And then he talks about some of the more potential candidates, generally speaking, before we get into specifics. We'll do that right after I tell you a little bit about FanDuel. Get your buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live, same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to our conversation with the publisher of GSU Panther Talk, Ben Moore on the challenges that the athletic departments are dealing with financially and why Georgia State will not be promoting from within for the head coaching position. All right, so yes, it was a special case for Shawn Elliott to go to Carolina, just like it was for Kane Womack. I don't think if Mike Norvell takes the Alabama job, he's leaving. Except, and Chip Kelly was a strange case, right? To go from Power 5 head coach to Power 5 coordinator, that's kind of an odd move as well. But for the Buffalo coach and Kane Womack, those may be better opportunities to get head coaching jobs. And I use this, and it's maybe throwing shade to him, but Jeff Lebby from Mississippi State had zero, nada, none, never was a head coach. And he got the Power 5 gig, and Kane Womack, despite maybe because of he had a not as good a season as he was supposed to, I don't think he was in the mix at Mississippi State. So he sees that and is like, well, going from a DC at Alabama is a better chance of me getting a Power 5 head coaching job. And at the same time, maybe we're at that point because the discussion is the NIL and the portal. It's really tough to, build a program. It's tough to have a quarterback, for example, sit for 2 years. The Mac Jones experiment isn't going to work too much anymore, where you sit for first you're going to mature physically, right? And then you're going to learn the playbook. And then, when you're a redshirt sophomore, you're going to come in. That's not the way it is anymore. And so maybe Shawn Elliott is like, all right, I can still go make, I don't know, I don't know what he's making, 300, 400.
800K. Yep, 800K total comp. Yep.
As the head coach or as the tight ends coach?
Probably both, because they made him a run game coordinator as well. So they added run game coordinator to his side of things. I mean, and this is the funny part about this. Ultimately, yes, it was the head coach, so certainly that grabs the headlines. But it's the third consecutive spring practice the Panthers have lost a significant piece of their coaching staff. Last year, they lost Nathan Fuqua to Cincinnati, right in the middle of that. He went to go be a linebackers coach, doubled his salary, got a 2-year guaranteed deal. The year before that, Brad Glenn goes to Virginia Tech after the bowl game. Josh Stepp is elevated. He goes to Louisville. So, and to go be the tight ends coach up there, again, doubling his salary. I think this just more illustrates the disparity between the group of 5 financials and the Power 5 position coaches, because you can add a run game coordinator or this and that and the other associate head coach, or however you want to linguistically play with it and add things to sprinkle in more money. And I truly don't think, I wrote about this on Friday, ultimately, Shawn had made over $4 million as the Georgia State head coach. So I'm not his financial advisor, but if he invested that well, also, it's a better quality of life, right? Happy wife, happy life, being able to see your wife and kids every day. And let's just be brutally honest, a tight ends coach has a heck of a lot more responsibilities than a head coach does. You're not standing in front of the media every week. You're not being responsible week in and week out for fans and Twitter and social media. Right. And like you mentioned, NIL and portal stuff. And 11 players from Georgia State, their best players, impact players, the last 2 off seasons have been grabbed by Power 5 teams. That wore on him a lot. And it's hard to be a group of 5 coach right now because you recruit these players, sign them, develop them, only to see them exit when they hit their prime.
Yeah, so that came down the last week or so. The SEC getting $51.2 million per school, and that covers the entire coaching staff. Alabama paid like $37.5 million. Mississippi State was like $23 million. And we're not just talking about the football team. We're talking about all of the coaching staff. So basketball, baseball, softball, whatever sports you may have. And it turns out the largest budget or revenue in the entire Sun Belt is, let me wait for it, Georgia State at $46 million. So that's their entire revenue, whereas the SEC is handing out $51 million. They don't have to sell a ticket. They don't have to sell a sponsorship. They don't have to sell a cap or a beer before, to pay for their coaches. And still somehow some of these SEC teams are losing money. I don't know. That's feasible.
Yeah, I think that's fuzzy math, Dave. I think I'd really. Right. I'm not an auditor, but I would certainly love to see those books at some point.
Yeah. All right. We're talking with Ben Moore, 24/7 Sports GSU Panther Talk. All right. So my initial thought, because of the timing, and I may or may not have been crushed by certain GSU Panther Talk hosts, I got double teamed. That You would think that the easy way to go would be to promote from within. Apparently, some don't believe that to be the case. Why? Before we talk about the candidates, why wouldn't that be the case? As spring practice, as you mentioned, had already gotten underway.
It did, and they were paused, and they went back to winter workouts, and in kind of a interesting move, just for the time being, the strength and conditioning coach Mike Siriano, affectionately known as Iron Mike, within the Panthers facility there, getting the guys back out, making sure they're going to class, making sure they're participating in workouts, getting their responsibilities done as the coaching staff progresses. But I think more than anything else, not elevating an interim, even in name, tells you a lot about the administration and their thought process on the existing staff as well. I mean, I don't believe there's an existing staff member that would be a candidate for this job. I think that was a clear message ultimately from the administration. And honestly, there's a lot of young coaches. I mean, Shawn Elliott, when the team won 8 games 3 years ago, he may have thought that was going to be his opportunity for a Power 5 job. Instead, 5 of his assistants got plucked and taken, and they moved on to a variety of different places. I mentioned a little earlier, Virginia Tech and Louisville and Cincinnati and places like that. So I think that's the difficult part about it as well, is when you went young and hungry and going and getting guys that are, young in the business, you just look around and you don't have a lot of options. Trent McKnight was a wide receivers coach and then elevated to OC. You have, Chad Staggs, who of course was on the Coastal Carolina staff, and it was his first year last year. He's a relatively young assistant in terms of experience at the FBS level as well. So I think that kind of pushed that to the side immediately. And I think that really just swings the door open to say, hey, look, we can go identify some candidates. We know we'll be approached by candidates from a lot of different levels and really just do a really thorough search. And I expect things candidly to pick up pretty quickly. From what I understand, interviews already have started today, this morning, and we'll continue through Tuesday. And I expect some news by the end of the week.
All right, so this is where it gets tough for both entities. And always when a head coach gets fired, you feel bad for them, but they're always usually got a 7-figure payout, right? So they're going to be okay. It's the assistant coaches that, are making, low 6 figures, but it's nowhere near the kind of money that head coaches are. And so now what are we doing with the current, Georgia State staff? I presume that the new coach is going to try to bring in his own guys. He may keep some of the guys, but all of these guys got to be in limbo. And I've got to believe that some of them may not wait to find out who the new Georgia State head coach is.
Yeah, the stress level has to be pretty high, right? It's almost like a company buyout. If anybody's been in a company that has another company come in there in a merger or somebody buy your business, you don't know what's going to happen, especially the higher you get up the food chain. So I know there's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. You do have 2 Georgia State alums on this staff, and former quarterback Dan Ellington. You have former cornerback, defensive back Antrell Allen, who's on the staff as well. I'm sure they would like to know whether they're going to stay or they're going to go. If I had to guess, I think there's probably going to be a mixture of coaches that stay and go, just based on the actual calendar timing of this. Because who else is going to be able to provide you some feedback and some quality scouting on your own roster, right? You have 80 some scholarships right now that are accounted for. There's not a tremendous amount of room. Now, with that being said, we also know the transfer portal will remain open basically. Well, this coaching time frame. So you got, 24, 25-ish days, and then it swings open again after spring semester in April for 2 weeks. So that's another opportunity to go and either push players out, which we know certainly does happen. It's the kind of the dirty side of the business, but then be able to grab and assess needs and go out and find those extra players that maybe jettison, from their own roster, or just looking to come back home, as I mentioned a little earlier.
All right, one more time out. When we come back, we'll wrap up our conversation with the publisher of GSU Panther Talk and 24/7 Sports, Ben Moore. We'll talk about specifically who are some of the candidates that he think may be up for the job. And, of course, we can't let Ben get away without talking about the legendary Lefty Driesell. We'll do that right after I tell you about LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 small businesses are using LinkedIn right now for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's wrap things up with the publisher of GSU Panther Talk, Ben Moore. He discusses the potential candidates for the head coaching job and pays homage to his former head coach, Lefty Driesell. Talking to Ben Moore, 24/7 Sports on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so let's get to it. Who are some of the potential candidates for the Georgia State Panthers head coaching job?
Yeah, not to burn any sources specifically, but I have talked to several folks in the last 48 hours. They have had multiple Power 5 coordinators are very interested in this position. Several FCS head coaches, which, from what I understand, there's some folks on the Georgia State administration side of things that were intrigued and interested in talking to some successful FCS head coaches. Now keep in mind, Dave, you started this program. You've only had 3 head coaches in 15 years. So ultimately, you had Bill Curry, who was a legend. Coached obviously at Alabama and Kentucky and Georgia Tech here locally, and a Georgia Tech graduate, an Atlanta staple. Trent Miles, he was a guy and a builder, right? He literally, the Indiana State program, they were ready to UAB it. They were ready to get rid of it completely. He stepped in there and took them to the playoffs in 3 years and kind of elevated them back up. And what's funny is he's back in the state of Indiana now working for Notre Dame. Shawn Elliott has really kind of taken that next step. And then this team was a bowl team, right? 5 times,
right?
In his 7 years. And they averaged, I think, 5.8 wins a year. So basically, hey, they were competitive. The biggest thing I will say now is it's a lot more attractive today than it was when he took the job in December 2016. And I mean, you have a stadium, you have facilities, you have meeting rooms, and you have honestly a university that will support football from the standpoint of resource allocation, because that has been a question in this search. They have been multiple Power 5 assistant coaches that I know for a fact, SEC, ACC coaches who are interested and want in on this job. Ultimately, they have questions too, right? They want to see what's next. Is there an indoor practice facility that's going to be on the agenda? As there's several that have been constructed within the Sun Belt. Because if you want to compete in the Sun Belt East or for a Sun Belt title in general, you got to keep up with the Joneses even in this league. So, knowing that specifically in the state of Georgia, the student fee percentage is not going to increase. That used to be the ride. That used to be, and James Madison's doing a heck of a job doing it right now. I laugh every single time when someone's like, "Oh, well, James Madison has the highest budget and this and that and the other." And I said, "Yeah, they have the highest Division I student fee percentage. Number one. As soon as they jump FBS, yeah, they have a near $58.5 million budget. They're going to be able to afford certain things that other schools cannot." With that being said, Georgia State has a tremendous advantage. You have a fertile recruiting area in Metro Atlanta.
Yeah.
Just in our system alone, there's 100 3-star prospects annually from the state of Georgia. So you don't need them all. You go sign 18 to 20, and just to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, 24/7, we rank 3-star guys are basically impact starters at Group of 5 or contributors, guys that will play at the Power 5 level. That's the expectation. So you're talking about, yes, this is some of the better high school prospects out there. You go and look at former 3-star guys in the NFL, and they far outnumber 4-star and 5-star guys. So Sun Belt programs, to be successful, have to go and hit those 3-star guys, keep them home, or if they do leave and jump, go bigger, go grab them on the bounce back, right? We saw Ron Hunter a few years ago and his tournament runs, multiple tournament runs, going and grabbing big name guys who went to Virginia Tech out of high school or Kentucky out of high school, bring them back and finish their career at home. There is a formula here. The question that I've talked to from a lot of candidates and folks that are close to candidates say, there's an expectation of winning there now. I've seen a lot of names, kind of thrown up against the wall. I mean, you have a lot of people that are interested in this job just simply because of the financial ramifications. It's going to pay $850,000 annually.
Sure.
If you're an FCS coach, you're probably making $300, $350, $375. That's a significant jump. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, go ask Bob Chesney, over there at from Holy Cross to JMU. His world got a heck of a lot easier, and his life got a heck of a lot better, both on and off the field. So, there's a lot of candidates that are interested in this position, and now I give Charlie Cobb a ton of credit. A lot of folks have been down on him. He's balanced the Georgia State budget, and he's made tremendous hires because his hires have been hired away, and that tells you a lot about his hiring power here in the Sun Belt.
All right, so my sources, if you will, were telling me that Bob Chesney was about to get the Syracuse job, but someone in Syracuse, or the money people, didn't want the FCS head coach, despite more than a decade of head coaching experience and a really good head coach. They didn't even get a coordinator, right? They went and got a really good recruiter in Fran Brown, but he's never even been a defensive coordinator, defensive backs coach. All right, so far he's doing pretty good. We haven't seen what's going to happen on the field. Having said that, where do you prefer? Do you prefer the position coach or a coordinator from a Power 5 team, or do you don't mind the FCS head coach that already has a method to his madness, if you will?
Yeah, I think there's balance on either side. I think ultimately you need somebody that has recruited Georgia and is comfortable recruiting Georgia. I think that's the biggest thing ultimately. Shawn Elliott and his staff really struggled to sign Metro Atlanta talent out of high school. They had to go into South Alabama, or to go to Alabama, go into Tennessee, go into South Carolina, his home state, and a lot of those players did hit, and some of it, like Darren Granger and Sam Pinckney and guys like that, a lot of them didn't. And there's names that really only Georgia State fans are going to know and recognize because they never saw the field or never had consistent time. There's just way too much talent in the state of Georgia. I'm out every Friday night at a Metro Atlanta high school talking to coaches, and some just didn't see Georgia State staff a lot and only communicated them, only once during spring practice or once during fall practice. That there's a certain perception, right, wrong, or indifferent, that Shawn basically didn't want to recruit kids that were from here. So that's priority number one, stepping right in here and saying, hey, we're going to keep Georgia kids home. We're not going to go and beat kids at Georgia or even Georgia Tech potentially, who is the Panthers, oh, by the way, week 1 opponent. But ultimately trying to go and say, look, we got to beat off Georgia Southern, who, oh, by the way, lost their offensive coordinator today to Alabama.
That's right.
And may have an opportunity where Clay Helton is on very unsteady ground down in Statesboro today. So going and saying, look, we need to find someone that can recruit and develop and keep people here. Now, I'm with you from an FCS head coach side of things. Having a successful head coach, you know as well as I do from the college football world, there's certain FCS programs, and they're probably enough to count on your hands and your feet, that have a lot of resources. Everyone else it's string and duct tape trying to really make things happen. So
that's right.
Programs that are really, and coaches that are understanding the resource limitations really can take advantage of that and have an opportunity here and build out a recruiting staff. I mean, there's many FCS programs that don't have a recruiting staff. They use graduate assistants and having folks basically that tap the line that way to go and find out and be, even positions like high school liaisons, going and having people to have official visits and things like that. I think that changes a lot in this case. I would prefer a guy, and this is, I've been kind of public with it as well. A guy like Brian McClendon. He was the wide receivers coach and pass game coordinator for the University of Georgia and Kirby Smart. The last 3 stops he made were Oregon. He was at Georgia for back-to-back national titles, and he was at South Carolina calling plays with Muschamp before that. Ultimately, he's seen some success. He's seen how Sabanites do it. And I have long maintained over the last time that people that come from the Nick Saban tree can grab habits, can grab templates, and really build out on that and say, look, this is what they do at Alabama. This is what they do at Georgia to be successful. Let's translate it down to the Georgia State level, the Sun Belt level, and build that out. No, we're not going to have 16-member recruiting staffs. But, hey, you 2 people over here, this is what I need you guys to do. Hey, coaches, this is what I need you to do. This is the standard we're going to build out. Brian was a finalist for this job when Shawn Elliott got it back in 2016. And as I mentioned, he's bounced around. There's guys like Del McGee, who, oh, by the way, his son Austin signed with the Panthers back in December, and he's arriving in June. Talked to Austin yesterday. Tell McGee is a candidate for this job as well. He's on the University of Georgia staff. You've had names like Brian Bohannon, who has wild success at Kennesaw State, that has been rumored out there. I'm not sure how valid that is, especially with the triple option. Just doesn't. It's not getting a whole lot of traction in FBS football right now outside the academies, but or maybe down at Georgia Southern. I don't know. Maybe they get rid of Helton and call Bohannon. But I think there's a lot of candidates that are interested. There is inherent risk, though, as you mentioned with Fran Brown. First-time head coaches, look, man, you're the CEO. It's your show. You set everything from practice times to where we eat and what we eat and travel and everything that way. There's some folks that can handle it, some folks that can't.
All right, let's wrap things up with Ben Moore, 24/7 Sports, GSU Panther Talk. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, the legendary Lefty Driesell passes away. A lot of people know him at Maryland, obviously spent time at Georgia State. Your thoughts on the legend and his time with the Panthers?
Yeah, he was due in large part for the reason that I came to Georgia State. I was a walk-on basketball player under Lefty Driesell. I say failed walk-on multiple times. Tried to walk on, tried to see the court. He only signed 3 high school players in his time, 5+ years at Georgia State. Again, he was old. He didn't want to wait on high school guys, right? So he went to junior college and Division I All-Americans and guys like that, and transferred. And we talked about it a little bit earlier with what the profile entails for the Georgia State football coach. He went and got some of the better players in Metro Atlanta that either left the program because of not playing or family reasons and different things like that, and took them to a 29-5 season my sophomore year. It made my college experience, quite candidly, and talking to folks then and now, and really since coach has passed away on Saturday, it's not hyperbole to say that if Lefty doesn't have the success at Georgia State and really wakes up the athletic department, football doesn't exist. It just doesn't. The president and everyone else was fully against football. And there was an article in the Atlanta Business Chronicle that literally called it the F word. They refused to mention football in athletic meetings and athletic board meetings. The president wouldn't tolerate it. So shortly thereafter, a club football team, which I was fortunate to be a part of from the marketing and media side of things, started in 2001 after Lefty took the Panthers to the NCAA tournament, winning 29 games, beating Georgia, and going and beating Wisconsin in the NCAA tournament, eventually losing to Maryland. But it lit the fuse. And from that point, the president and administration and even students kind of woke up to the fact of, hey, we can get serious about athletics. And that was really the first step with Georgia State becoming serious about athletics was hiring Charles Lefty Driesell after he was let go of James Madison. And, he's an incalculable loss to college basketball, to certainly Georgia State. And to me personally, he was fantastic to me and my family. When I just became a student and got to see him coach and, coach against legendary coaches like John Thompson in the Georgia Dome or Jerry Tarkanian in the Sports Arena, where I laugh. Fresno State and Jerry Tarkanian came into the Georgia State Sports Arena in front of about 612 fans, literally. Oh. And there were people in the third deck doing their homework. And my dad and I were sitting there, and I'm going, Hall of Fame coach. Like, this is insanity. But he did things, and he woke Georgia State up in a way to teach them how to do it. When they made the NCAA tournament, the administration had no clue. He went to the administration. I heard a story yesterday. He went and told the president of the school and said, what are you going to do for the students that aren't making the trip out to Boise? And he said, well, I don't know. What do we need to do? He said, pull every single TV in every single common area and turn our game on. And they did. And you had news coverage. And for literally a week, the city of Atlanta was on fire because Lefty Driesell and the Panthers had won an NCAA game. They had success that they had never seen before, and it was incredible. I think the number was 6 NCAA tournament teams that he beat that year. And if not for an elbow jumper missed by my great friend Lamont McIntosh the following year, they'd have gone back-to-back. They'd have gone back-to-back NCAA tournament teams. So they ended up going to the NIT that year, and then he got up basically in December, and his body was hurting, and he retired. But I'm happy for Coach. His coaching tree is incredible, as well as grandsons. Both are coaches now as well. Michael Moynihan I think he was at McNeese State last year, and Pat Moynihan as well. I had a chance to reach out to both of them yesterday, and they're just happy that their grandfather is with their grandmother now. And but no, Lefty was an incredible person. He was super kind to me personally, Dave, and we will miss him at Georgia State. And I thank God he was elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame. I think that was the biggest thing. I was glad to do that while he was in good health, and obviously his son being able to get there. And I encourage anybody that listens to this podcast, pull up his speech and just, if you're a basketball fan or just a sports fan in general, pull it up on YouTube at some point today or this week, and just learn a little bit more about Charles Lefty Driesell and just his impact on the game of college basketball.
Well, yeah, because let's say you gave George Raveling the credit for Midnight Madness because he was not smart enough. He said Coach K had to listen at Army because if you don't listen, you die, right? And he said, I stopped playing John Thompson because he turned Georgetown into Georgetown. So
right.
He was, and that was just the only part that I saw. I have no idea why you threw your buddy McIntosh under the bus, but that was a good job by you. You're going to have to deal with that when he finds out that you did.
Oh yeah, listen, he and I talked about that, and I told him, I said he could take one more dribble. He could have jumped from the lane and get a layup. Instead, he wanted the elbow jumper. So yeah, we've dissected that play probably 80 times. In the 20-some years we've been friends, so it's all good.
He's been more 24/7 Sports, GSU Panther Talk. Really appreciate you coming on. Best of luck with the coaching search. We'll see where it lands. We are on day 6. Thanks for hopping on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you, man.